Sports has seen many great rivalries. Federer versus Nadal, Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier, Lin Dan versus Lee Chong-wei. Each delivered tense moments, drama, and unforgettable battles. But if there is one rivalry that stands above them all, not just in chess, but in all of sports, it's Karpov versus Kasparov. This was more than just two players fighting over a title. It was political, it was personal, it was brutal. A decade-long war played out across 144 games, where every move carried the weight of history. The games were masterpieces. The tension was unbearable. Two men, utterly different in style and personality, yet bound together by destiny, locked in a struggle that defined an era. This is the story of chess's greatest rivalry, a clash where the stakes were sky high, the pressure relentless, and neither man willing to back down. Welcome to the mad world of the Karpov-Kasparov era. By 1981, the chess world was just catching its breath from the epic battles between Anatoly Karpov and Viktor Korchnoi. Karpov had emerged victorious in two consecutive World Championship matches, firmly establishing himself as the undisputed king of chess. Since inheriting the crown in 1975, he had ruled with an iron grip, sweeping tournament after tournament, leaving no challenger in sight. It seemed as if no one could touch him. No one could even come close. But a storm was brewing, and Karpov never saw it coming. 2 years earlier, in 1979, a chess tournament was held in Banja Luka, Yugoslavia. It was a prestigious event, featuring names like former world champion Tigran Petrosian, Ulf Andersson, and the world number 2, Viktor Korchnoi. Korchnoi, however, was forced to withdraw after Soviet authorities threatened to boycott him if he participated. The USSR, misunderstanding the tournament's scope, assumed it was a minor youth event. As a result, they sent an unknown, unrated 16-year-old Garry Kasparov. Everyone expected the teenager to be fed to the lions, a baptism of fire against some of the world's strongest grandmasters. But what happened next stunned the chess world. Kasparov didn't just survive, he dominated. Undefeated at 16 in a field of giants. A generational talent had arrived. Over the next 4 years, Kasparov carved his way through interzonals and candidates matches with relentless determination, earning the right to challenge for the world title in 1984. The stage was set. A 33-year-old Karpov, the reigning peak form champion, versus a fierce, fearless 21-year-old Kasparov. But this was no ordinary sporting contest. This was a political battlefield. Karpov represented the old Soviet Guard under Brezhnev. Kasparov was seen as the face of the new Soviet era, aligned with Gorbachev's winds of change. And what followed in the 1984 World Championship was something the sporting world had never witnessed before. The format for the 1984 World Championship was simple and brutal. First to 6 wins takes the crown. No time limit, no cap on games. The match began in September 1984, and from the outset, Anatoly Karpov took complete control. Within the first 9 games, he scored 4 victories. Kasparov looked outclassed, like a talented challenger who had stepped into an arena far too soon. Whispers began to spread. This will be over in days. But Kasparov wasn't ready to fold. Realizing he couldn't beat Karpov in a direct slugfest, He changed strategy. He slowed the tempo. He aimed for draws. His plan was clear: stretch the match as deep as possible. Karpov at 33 would tire. Kasparov, just 21, was in peak physical shape. Endurance would be his weapon. It worked, to a point. 17 consecutive draws followed, and then in Game 27, Karpov broke the deadlock. Another win. The score was 5-0. One more victory, and the match was over. Everyone thought it was only a matter of time, but Kasparov refused to bow. In Game 32, after months of frustration, he finally broke through with his first win. Momentum, ever so slightly, began to shift. He went back to his grinding strategy, forcing another 14 consecutive draws. By now, 46 games had been played across 5 grueling months. The match had turned into a war of attrition. Karpov was visibly fading. He had lost 10 kilograms since September, and Kasparov could smell blood. Then came the turning point. In Games 47 and 48, Kasparov struck twice in a row. The score was now 5-3. The impossible suddenly felt possible. Kasparov had momentum, and then FIDE stepped in. Citing the deteriorating health of the players, they called off the match entirely. The first time in chess history such a thing had happened. Kasparov was furious. He protested, arguing that both players had agreed to continue, so there was no reason to stop. But FIDE did not budge. The match was over. Not with a victory, but with a void. Kasparov was left distraught, convinced he had been robbed of his moment. After the abandoned 1984 marathon, FIDE convened to decide how the rematch would be fought. The new rules were clear: a best-of-24 format, and in the event of a tie, Karpov would keep his crown. No one could confidently say who was the favorite now. From the very start, the match was a slugfest. Both players traded blow for blow, game for game. The quality of chess was breathtaking. Each encounter a miniature masterpiece. One game in particular stood out: Round 4. Karpov, in peak form, produced a positional gem. His mastery of the light squares was so precise, so elegant, that it left the audience in awe. At one stage, he played 18 consecutive moves on light squares, a level of control that looked almost supernatural. Karpov won that game in style, sending a clear message. He was still the champion, and he wasn't going down quietly. The match raged on. By round 23, Kasparov had eked out a 1-point lead. Now, the equation was simple. Karpov needed to win the final game to tie the match and retain his title. Kasparov only needed a draw to become champion, but he knew that against Karpov, playing passively was dangerous. Round 24 would go down as one of the most thrilling games in chess history. Karpov, with the white pieces in a Sicilian, unleashed a fierce attack. His pieces swarmed forward, and for a moment it seemed inevitable. The champion was going to land the knockout blow. But then, in the chaos of the middle game, Karpov faltered. A single misstep, and Kasparov pounced. With icy precision, the 22-year-old launched a counterattack of his own, turning the tables in spectacular fashion. The game teetered on a knife's edge, the tension in the hall unbearable. And then, after hours of battle, Karpov's position collapsed. Garry Kasparov had done it. At just 22 years old, he was the new world chess champion, the youngest in history. The chess world erupted in celebration. A new era had begun, and the Kasparov reign was here. The rivalry didn't end in 1985. Karpov and Kasparov would go on to face each other in 4 more World Championship matches. In 1986, 1987, 1988, and 1990. Kasparov emerged victorious in every one of them. But here's the truth. It was never as one-sided as the scorelines might suggest. These were not walkovers. They were knife fights at the very highest level. Take 1987 as an example. After 23 games, Kasparov found himself trailing by a point. To retain his title, he had to win the final game. No other result would do. Under the crushing weight of pressure, Kasparov produced a brilliant fighting win to level the match and keep his crown. Kasparov later said that this was the most important game of his life. Moments like these showed just how razor-close their battles were. Through these encounters, Kasparov forged and reinforced his legacy. A legacy built in the fire of this rivalry. And Karpov, in turn, proved himself as one of the greatest fighters the chess world had ever seen. Across their 5 World Championship clashes, they played an astonishing 144 games. The final tally was Kasparov edging Karpov by the narrowest of margins, 21 wins to 19. But there was a strange side effect to this dominance over the chess world. For 10 years, the World Championship stage belonged only to them. Year after year, match after match, it was always Kasparov versus Karpov. Both men admitted in later interviews that there were times they grew tired of seeing the same face across the board. And yet, they knew no one else could push them to the same limits. The 1980s belonged to just 2 men. For an entire decade, Kasparov and Karpov stood alone at the summit, their ratings far ahead of the rest of the chess world. This was no ordinary rivalry. It was a long, drawn-out war. A duel so fierce that it kept every other challenger off the battlefield. Tournament after tournament, championship after championship, it was always them. And only them. If you've enjoyed diving into this epic story, make sure to subscribe to Hidden Tactic for more untold chess tales, and share this video with someone who loves the game as much as you do. Because every rivalry has a story, and we're here to tell them all.